just listening to some testimony from Jeffrey Martin, who is a McStay business associate of Joseph McStay, one of the victims here. He, along with his family, his wife and 2 children, were murdered. They disappeared, and then their bodies were recovered several years later near the Mojave Desert. This is a business partner that we're hearing from. What is the significance of his testimony?
So my belief is that the significance here is to go towards the motive as to why this was all committed. Again, they're saying that McStay had a number of debts and a gambling problem, and that to fund that gambling problem, he needed to make sure that certain people need to go away, and also to pull funds from the company.
So here's this business associate trying to get paid, or excuse me, trying to get his fountains that he had paid for, and he keeps saying, where are they?
But yes, but he keeps getting invoices as to pay and pay. So again, goes to their whole theory of why did this happen? What is the purpose for killing these people? And again, it's to these gambling debts and to trying to recover money through the company.
Interesting. Okay, let's listen to a bit more testimony from Jeffrey Martin, specifically when the judge starts asking him questions.
Initially, a $6,250 deposit, correct?
Correct.
And that was sent to Earth Inspired Products.
That's my recollection, correct.
Okay. You don't know who at Earth Inspired Products it was sent to, no?
I don't.
Okay. Then there was a $2,000 payment that Mr. Merritt requested to Catherine Jarvis.
Correct.
And then there was a $4,000 payment to Mr. Merritt upon the pickup of the fountains.
Correct.
And then there was a $1,950 payment to Walker Sheet Metal.
Correct.
Okay. Other than those, are you aware of any other payments for those 2 fountains?
Other than to my subcontractors once we got them, or no?
That's anyone involved in Earth Inspired Products?
I don't know any other payments.
Okay. Did you ever have any conversations with Daniel Kavanaugh?
I don't remember having any conversations.
Do you recall either Mr. Merritt or anyone else referring you to Daniel Kavanaugh regarding the fountains?
I don't remember that.
Okay. Anything else?
Okay, so somewhat unusual that a judge actually getting involved in a trial, it does happen, asking the witness questions. Any sense of what he was trying to get at here?
So you're right. Usually questions are asked by defense attorneys or prosecutors, but judges do have the ability to ask questions, typically for clarification. I've never seen questioning to this extent. Usually it's for foundational purposes, like, do you recognize that photo or things here? But it seems like the judge might have curiosities of their own that they're trying to flush out, or might feel that the jury is slightly confused at some of the information that's coming in, so they are endeavoring on their own to clear up some of that information.
Yeah, I mean, overall, though, as we look at this case, I mean, obviously it's a very tragic case. Here you have 2 young children. There's the defendant there. You have 2 young children, and these parents, Joseph McStay and his wife, that were brutally murdered. And now you have a death penalty case years after this probably happened. With, as you've been looking over the case, do you see a ton of hard evidence linking Charles Merritt to what happened?
I don't see, definitely not a ton. There might be some evidence linking Charles Merritt to the murder. But what I think that the DA or the prosecutor is really trying to do is go really hard into this motive to murder, to try to make that circumstantial leap as to, sure, I don't have the smoking gun or I don't have all the evidence to link this murder, but look at how strong that motivation is and look at the result and then see what came from it. It would be analogous to saying Brian doesn't have a laptop and Brian desperately needed a laptop and you walked out of the room and the laptop went missing. Sure, we might not have video of it, we might not have fingerprints, but the motive is so strong and the outcome is there, we can obviously assume what happened in between. Connect
the dots. Okay, we have to take a quick break here on the Law and Crime Network. We'll be back in just a few minutes with more testimony from the McStay family murders case. Stay with us. Okay, so this business associate talking a lot about, how Joseph McStay and the defendant Charles Merritt worked together. And when we're listening to testimony like this, what's going through my mind as a juror, if I put my juror cap on, is how is this relevant? Because it seems kind of technical. Can you tell by just listening to that?
So from just listening to it, no. And the unfortunate part about a lot of trials is there are a lot of portions that are not like what you see on TV. They're dry, and sometimes it can go over your head and are confusing. And even to me, some of it doesn't make sense. But the hope is that at summation, at closing arguments, they can go and kind of collect these breadcrumbs and say, okay, this associate might have testified and it might have seemed completely irrelevant and completely abstract, but now let me show you how it plays into the part in this case. Guessing, I believe that if the argument is that there's a motive to kill based on Charles Merritt having these gambling debts, then the rebuttal would be that any money that might have moved back and forth between Charles Merritt, his business partners, and any third parties, are either one, the common course of business, and so you have a rebuttal witness like that, or two, that it's the other guy that they're pinning it on. So part of this trial, even though motive is not an element to any actual crime, is very focused on motive or lack thereof, because there's so little evidence.
Absolutely. Okay, let's listen to a bit more testimony from Elva Francesca, who is that employee you were just hearing from. Maybe we'll get to the heart of why she's important here.
Remember the defendant telling Mr. McStay that he needed an additional pump?
He would say, we need more pumps, I'm out of pumps.
And to your knowledge, was the defendant using pumps that he had received from Mr. McStay for his own personal projects?
Objection, no foundation.
Ooh.
Speculation.
Ooh. Yes.
And did you ever have an opportunity to tell Joseph McStay that the defendant was doing that?
Yes.
How long did you actually work for the defendant?
From March 2007 to December 2007. 8 months.
Now, would you also have contact during that time with Joseph McStay on the phone?
On occasions.
Did you ever have a conversation with Mr. McStay regarding payroll for the business?
Yes.
What was that about?
There was an occasion where we were behind on rent and there was no funds to do payroll, and Charles had called Joseph telling him that a water feature was complete in order to get payment and funds into the account. And I notified, or we spoke about that water feature, the status of it being completed when I spoke to Joseph and informed him that it wasn't complete. However, we were low on funds and he was probably trying to make payroll.
Did Joseph McStay end up sending the money for payroll?
Yes.
Okay, so that's important there because they're talking about how the business is really having some issues with money.
Yeah. And again, I think that piggybacks off of the whole concept of the motive here. There's also a testimony as to the relationship between Joseph McStay and Charles Merritt, and maybe there was contention between the two of them. I'm not sure what the lawyer there is trying to pull out, but if you can highlight how the business is ran, how money flows, who collects that money, who has the communication, and maybe even talk about the relationship between Joseph and Charles Merritt, or Joseph McStay, sorry, and Charles Merritt, then you can try to start to pull out facts as to the motive.
Yeah, it's very interesting here. Okay, we're going to take a quick break here on the Law and Crime Network. We're going to continue our coverage of this California murder case when we return. Okay, so I misspoke there. I said we were going to hear testimony from that former QuickBooks representative. We are in just a few minutes, but first you are hearing the defense in their opening statements try to rebut to start any evidence regarding QuickBooks. And Brian Buckmire, who's a public defender here in New York City, what do you think defense's point with this is? Basically, the prosecution is saying, isn't this strange? Like, the day they disappeared, the day after they disappeared, all this activity is happening on the QuickBooks account. And the defense is really trying to rebut that.
Absolutely. So I think for here, the prosecution's theory, or it's a common theme that we talk about as lawyers, is footsteps in the snow. Mm-hmm. You went to bed at night, you didn't see any footsteps in the snow, you woke up in the morning, you saw them there. Now, you didn't see the person who walked, but because of the evidence behind, you know someone was there. Here, the defense attorney is coming up and saying, let me explain those footsteps. There might have been a death here, but it's not my client. Let me explain why one would do this with a QuickBook account. Let me explain why this might work and explain that everyone was alive at this time. There's nothing nefarious about it.
And before we get into the testimony, let's talk a little bit about the significance of the QuickBooks information, because from what I can tell, the prosecution is putting a lot of stock into what happened with us.
Yeah, again, it goes into motive. It's the fact that there's two QuickBook accounts by Joseph Stay, one of which had Chase Merritt, that already existed in proper capitalization by the first letter of each name. Then another one is made with smaller lowercase letters. And then money is moved and not recorded, and it's on a computer that initially was online, so anyone can access it, and then it's from a specific computer. And I believe the prosecution is trying to draw the line that Charles Merritt was in preparation of this act from days before, that he was getting the money in the dust.
He was getting it ready before, because a lot of this activity that the prosecution notes was suspicious happened in the days leading up to the disappearance back in February of 2010.
Correct.
Okay, so leading all of that up is to this QuickBooks representative who I mentioned. He had to Skype in, and believe me, nothing is fast in this trial. There was a whole fight over that as well. But the jurors did finally hear from this representative. Let's see if what he had to say was that damning for Charles Merritt. Take a listen.
And I would not have been able to delete the information until I received those emails back.
Okay, so there's additional steps that have to be followed in order for that to occur. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
So someone calls you and indicates that they are Joseph McStay and they want to delete their account. What was the next step that you took?
The next step that I took was I told them that I was going to send them an email, that they needed to fill out the email and send it back to me, and then we would start the process of removing the information from the servers.
And would that email have been sent to the custom@earthinspiredproducts.com account?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you tell us essentially what the email says that you send out?
The email is basically just a small protection that says, you can please fill out this email that says my name, or you can fill in your own name. Do hereby get permission for QuickBooks to delete all the information for business name. And they would fill that information out and send it back to me that they get permission to do that.
Okay, and did you send that first email out right after you talked with who you believe to be Mr. McStay?
I did, yes, ma'am.
And did you receive any response?
No, ma'am.
Did you follow up after you did not receive a response to that email?
I did, yes, ma'am.
And what does the second email you sent say, essentially?
Essentially, the second email is a follow-up. I haven't heard anything from you. If you need any other information, please let me know. It's basically just a touch base.
And did you receive a response from that email?
I did not, no, ma'am.
Did you then send a third email?
I did, yes, ma'am.
And do you recall when that email was sent?
A few days later, usually 3 or 4 days, and we don't hear any contact, we'll send a final email saying, hey, listen, I haven't heard anything back from you. I'm going to go ahead and close this case. But if you do have any other questions, by all means, feel free to get in touch.
Okay, and as I asked for QuickBooks on that account.
That I do remember, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So if somebody else had ordered a new version of QuickBooks on the Joseph McStay 69@hotmail.com, would that information populate over to the custom@earthinspiredproducts.com account?
No, ma'am. It would not, because it's the account itself, if they purchase another version of QuickBooks, the purchase of the program is not associated to the business records.
Okay.
They can purchase another version or another subscription with another email or anything like that. Or, walk into a store.
Okay.
And buy them from QuickBooks.
And do you recall what any, is there a set line that QuickBooks uses for customer service calls?
Okay, so where do you think the prosecutor was going with this QuickBooks testimony?
I think it again goes to motive. I think a lot of it was we're seeing as motive is look at how the QuickBooks were handled prior to the days, or maybe even the weeks prior to them being missing, because you have to establish that there was some sort of common course of business. And then just before the family goes missing, there's all this hectic moving around, and what was just 2 accounts now becomes 3, and one gets deleted and added, and checks are cashed and sent, and people are requesting plumbing and other things that are not being given. And so now there's a kind of like this shady area that the business is being run, and then all of a sudden one person just disappears and their whole family disappears. And I think that they're trying to pin that whole excuse on Charles Merritt.
But again, I go back to with this case, and by the way, we're going to get into some of the cross-examination of the QuickBooks rep. In the world of trials, that's pretty exciting. Yeah. But, again, because this is really a key witness for the prosecution here, because they're really banking a lot of, like you said, motive, financial motive, on what these strange activities that happen with the QuickBooks account. Okay, as I mentioned, we are going to take a quick break, but when we return, we're going to have the defense's turn at cross-examination of this representative from QuickBooks. Stay with us here on Law&Crime. Okay, Brian Buckmire, you're a defense attorney. You've been in his shoes before doing cross-examination. How do you think he's doing so far? We're going to listen to more of the cross-examination, by the way, but this QuickBooks guy.
So I don't think anyone's cross-examination should be gauged by how many times you're sustained. And sustained being you say something that's objectionable. Obviously, he's sustained quite a few times.
By the way, you're really far from me right now.
Sorry.
Okay.
Bring it back in.
Okay, keep going.
Yeah, so you should never gauge that. But I do think that he has a voice record, that those calls are recorded. It comes on at the beginning.
They always say that at the end of the calls.
I think it could be laid down much simpler. And what's happening here, that the real problem that I see at least, is he's starting to become combative with a witness that truly isn't an antagonistic witness.
Yeah, this is like the QuickBooks rep. What does he have to gain in all of this?
This should be a witness that you ask questions of, and the witness is just like, yeah, I'll answer that. I'll answer that. And you should be able to pull all of those facts out of them without having to fight. This is not a police detective or an officer who, when they walk in, they say, oh, defense table, I know you're the enemy. I know I'm going to give you a hard time. This is someone you should be able to pick up a lot of information from very easily, and he's kind of alienating him, I think.
Okay, so you've given him a C so far in his cross-examination?
Yeah, he's going to eventually get there, but it's going to be a lot harder than it should be.
Okay, so let's listen to a little bit more of the cross-examination of the QuickBooks representative. Again, remember, this is a crucial witness because he's the one laying out the foundation that there was something really weird going on in the days before and the days after the McStay family disappeared, involving the victim, Joseph McStay's QuickBooks account that he used in business. Take a listen.
Just a minute. Anything else, Ms. Rodriguez?
Yes. Mr. Baker, you indicated that you have reviewed a message or some notes regarding a call on 8. Do you recall that?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any information that a transfer actually took place of the data on the 8th?
No, ma'am.
And were you able to determine from the email that you read whether a disk was actually sent out for QuickBooks on the 8th?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Knowing that a phone call came in for a transfer of data on the 8th, and then still receiving that phone call on the 9th, asking for a deletion of data, do you still find that call to be unusual on the 9th?
Yes, ma'am, very.
Why?
Most business owners, if you anyone who has their data anywhere in a cloud or anywhere like that, the main thing that's worried about is protection. They don't want anything to happen to their data. What if something goes wrong? What's my contingency? What's my backup? What's my backup of a backup? This is my company information. It's my livelihood. That's what most people tend to think about it and at least perceive off in their phone call.
Now, if somebody puts a desktop version on, there's also the ability to access that online. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes, ma'am.
And you indicated that you would, I know there was a good deal amount of time spent on a particular slide with all of Mr. McStay's accounts, but the notes that you made and the information that you made for that caller had the specific email address of custom@earthinspiredproducts.com. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And the caller indicated to you that he was Joseph McStay, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And in terms of the data, I don't think you got to finish your answer, but you indicated there was a difference between exporting data and deleting data. Can you explain what you meant by that?
Yeah, the data can be exported once a day.
Okay, so that was a redirect by the prosecutor, continuing to ask questions of Ryan Baker, that QuickBooks representative. What did you make of the redirect?
And the redirect is there, and it served its purpose to some degree, especially when she asked for opinion information as to is this peculiar or is this strange. It helps to rehabilitate the witness and to try to correct anything that the defense might have been able to bring in. And again, I think I've said this in past segments, part of what we do as lawyers is to bring in the information to help our client, but also part of it is how we relate to the jurors. And by looking here, I'm looking at the prosecutor. I'm actually liking her demeanor a lot more. I'm liking how she interacts with the witness. I'm liking how the witness is giving her information. And when you see the two of them interact, I'm like, oh, he seems like he's being more truthful and he's being more honest. And then when I see the defense attorney, I'm like, why is he being so agitated? Why is he so angry? Why are those emotions coming into play? And sometimes jurors can pick up on that and create impressions or ideas that might not otherwise be there. So you always have to be mindful of how you question a witness and not just what information you're getting out of them.
That's really interesting because when you're thinking, like you said, when you're looking at these trials, all of that comes into play with these jurors. They're looking at demeanors. It's not just the pure facts. As much as you and I, with legal training, would like it to be all about the facts and how the facts are applied to the law, we both know that's just not how these trials work.
Yeah, sometimes, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on who you are, it's a popularity contest. And there's a lot of times that, it's just human nature. I believe you if I like you. If I don't, the defense attorney or prosecutor up there and you're handling a witness in a way that is off-putting to the juror, sometimes they're not going to listen.
Okay, here's a quick question that's really been going through my mind about this case. So we're still in the prosecution's case. This case is supposed to go on for months more, allegedly. Where do you think Charles Merritt is going to have to take the stand, given what the defense is doing with this case? Would it behoove him to take the stand?
One, as a general practice, at least for me, I always prepare my clients to testify.
Do you?
Always.
Interesting.
Every client, no matter what the charge is, from the day that we know we're getting sent out to trial, we're prepping. Even months before sometimes.
Prepping your answers.
Well, we don't prep answers.
Right,
prep questions.
right. Answers. You don't
Never
prep answers.
We prep questions as to what might be done and what prosecutors might ask. But the decision as to whether or not that person should testify is always at the end of all the evidence brought in, because you never know until the final witness or the prosecutor comes in and you can evaluate whether or not I need my client to testify.
And that also helps you build the case, too, your defense case, when you're constantly working back and forth with your client about what is the story. Again, not prepping anything manufactured. I get that point. Yeah. But it does certainly help you kind of understand where you're going to go with the defense strategy. Okay, we have to take a quick break. I'm signing off. Stacey Delicat will be up next. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Law&Crime Network.